Hello and welcome to the Port Huron statement. I want to keep making content of a good clip, and it's not a bad time, so I decided I was going to make something, but I didn't really know what the hell I'm going to talk about. And then I just walked the dog and was thinking about the graviton, and I think there are two interesting little thought experiments I ended up finding myself on. I think I'm going to share them with you. The first one is, obviously, I find it very unlikely that there is a graviton, even though it's included in a lot of, as far as, it is still considered a part of the whole quantum mechanics model, the standard model, as far as I can remember. So, the whole thing with the graviton is, alright, obviously gravity's a part of existence in our world, and because the movement that gravity implies on objects and forces on them doesn't have an obvious origin, and because of the law of conservation of energy, and because all the other forces have a corresponding boson or subatomic particle, more or less, so it stands to reason that the graviton would exist, but now evidence as to why it probably doesn't exist. One, there is no observable relevance of gravity at the subatomic or even scaled out quite a bit scale. It's really hard to observe in the micro scale any real impact of gravity. And I should say, don't draw out too far, but anyway. What else? Oh, and then this is what I was actually thinking about is, alright, so when we send out Voyager and all these other satellites, there's an impact. There are two significant, impacts on the movement of a craft and moving through the solar system, moving out of the solar system. You have the solar wind and the other one with the photons. I guess they're two different things, but the point is, alright, so the photons, which have a zero mass, right, but because they have momentum, they still ultimately push on the object because we have essentially a zero static friction and really kinetic friction environment because of the ultra low density, the vacuum space. So that means these very modest forces will ultimately impact the trajectory, and so we see an impact of photons from the sun pushing on these satellites. Now, if the graviton were real, the graviton would have to exist either in densities proportional to the strength of the gravity in that area, or they would have to move in the direction of gravity, or both, and most likely both. Now, if that were true throughout the path of Voyager and these other satellites and stuff moving out of the solar system, you would see a change in the inertia based on either the densities of these gravitons changing based on the proximity to other planets and celestial bodies, or the push of the photons changing, there'd be additional inertia based on the direction, or again both. And there either has to be higher density of gravitons based on the observed gravity, or it has to be directional, almost certainly both, for that to work, because if it is a quantum particle, it can only carry a discrete and singular quanta of energy, meaning that for the acceleration to be greater, there would have to be greater photons or greater gravitons, or they would have to have greater energy. So they would have to either be in a greater density, or they'd have to have greater energies of speed, So, my point being that I think we can put to rest the graviton, and I think there are good explanations on other YouTubes that I found, but when you think about a zero inertia environment, these very modest movements, as we're saying, literal photons hitting a satellite, can have an impact on the trajectory. And so what seems likely is that the reason that that matter is being moved towards matter is more classical than it is quantum. It seems that, so when you create an initial, if we imagine the Big Bang, we have an initial movement. That initial movement then imbibes consequential substantial movement. And so, once it becomes cyclical, just imagine how lensing works, light and gravity. You're bending light, and it's refracting because of the gradation and the density of the media. And, oh my gosh, alright, so excuse me, just go and look at other explanations of, a non-graviton gravity concept. I'm kind of stumbling on this right now because I'm trying to get to the more salacious part of this thought experience. So where I end up getting this is realizing that, alright, there is a real possibility that the explanation of dark energy and dark matter is a huge jump, I'm sorry, but just go look at, I don't want to do a bad job, actually, and I started to realize I think I'm doing a bad job, so go find another. There's PBS Spacetime, his on gravity, great. Anyway, alright, so what if dark energy and or dark matter were actually manipulations of gravitational lensing of light in order, by an intelligent, race or whatever, in order to hide something? It's actually totally possible. You can manipulate gravity to bend light, obviously. Now, it takes large amounts of gravity to bend significant amounts of light. So if you think about the spots in our observable universe that exhibit this dark energy and dark matter, and this, I just thought of this while I was walking the dog, but I don't think it's completely unfounded. You could imagine, manipulating masses of celestial bodies or creating them, or even just positioning something where they might even naturally exist. Now, again, I'm just spitballing, but what I guess I'm saying is that it seems to me likely, and or possible at least, that the reason we're observing dark energy and dark matter is because of the results of a series of gravitational lensing effects on the light that is essentially making those regions, unseeable dark. It's like, obviously we can see stuff behind the sun. That was confirmed in one of those Einstein experiments. Oh yeah, that was right. You got a Michelson-Morley, the graviton. There was a whole thing in mind. It was a great spiel, but I was just stumbling on it. So Michelson-Morley, check out that experiment. That's the one that proved that the ether didn't exist. But the same type of thing could be applied to graviton. Anyway, so now I'm like, I think I could explain that better. Anyway, no, we're past that. Yeah. So Einstein, one of the whole things was, gravity is bending, sort of like the way he explained it is the shape of space-time. That's why the light bends. And I don't think that doesn't matter. So regardless of the mechanism, if you are able to bend the path of light based on gravity, then if you can reveal something, you can conceal it based on the same properties, it would be relatively easy to create. I believe, I shouldn't say that because this isn't one of the things that but, well, no, you think. The type of math that's used, I can definitely, you could develop, with what we have right now, a model to determine the types of conditions that you would need in order to conceal a region the size of the dark matter and dark energy regions that we're observing in the observable universe. And again, I haven't researched this, I'm just spitballing. But I'm gonna check it out and see if it's at all plausible, or like see what the numbers would require, what type of masses. And I guess if you were a intelligent life being or society, civilization, and you're trying to conceal, your existence and locations, movements, whatever, from visible light, you would assume that you would use existing, you put your port in a bay, you would put your secret high-tech alien base in a gravitational valley type thing, where you would already have sort of a deflection based on the surrounding celestial neighborhood. And so when you think about it, if we as human beings were to do things smarter and be managed better, we could be terraforming Venus right now, so and that, it's like, that sounds far-fetched, but remember that we went from having no space program to landing on the moon. Whether we did it or not, we definitely circled it a shit ton of times. And that was in a couple years. And NASA has the same budget adjusted for inflation right now. So, I guess my point is that if we actually sincerely worked towards the goals that these agencies claim that they're working towards, we could have achieved so much more. But really, most of these agencies are actually working towards embezzlement. That's why they keep creating, it's like, we need to insert for-profit industry into our government agencies because that's going to increase their efficiency, even though there is no paradigm where that is true. Once you add the necessity for profit, you have to reduce efficiency. The only way that it would offset is if you had such poor performance and poor infrastructure, apparatus, technology, and all that. But the government really should have, and has had historically, superior of all those things until obviously the Reagan catastrophe, which is, I agree with the idea of a small government. Absolutely. I am actually more of a libertarian than I am a liberal. But you cannot insert a for-profit model and expect greater efficiency. Some things need to be done by government. And you can argue whether or not that includes space exploration. That's fair. But my point is if it is going to include space exploration, it shouldn't easily become a factory for embezzlement, because that's what all of these agencies have become, because they don't sincerely seek to realize their political and social goals. And if they were doing so, that there would be more evidence of it. I mean, just the fact that NASA was able to get to the moon on the same budget adjusted for inflation that it's had pretty much the whole time, and up and down, it's actually, but there hasn't been any significant progress since NASA became heavily embedded with for-profit contractor BS. I mean, and a lot of it's crazy too, because once you make it to the moon, all these, if we made it to the moon, I actually do believe we did, but I mean, whatever. That means you already have the technology to do all this shit. So, what the fuck? Also, look at the safety record since they added more and more for-profit contractors. It's shitty. It's a great example of, if you're going to do it, right, it's either truly for-profit, and it's a for-profit venture that doesn't get to suck on the tit of the government and suck our public coffers, or it needs to be sincerely working towards its stated goals. And what we have is neither. We have a bloated government that what we have is neither. We have a government that doesn't work towards its stated goals and spends a ton of our money. It's inefficient, insincere. It's the worst of both worlds. Those consequences domino across the globe. We have to be better. But my hope is that, I want to start putting a shortwave broadcast together with the explicit intent of just letting the aliens know that, I ain't part of this, I ain't part of it, because, trying to fix it, but I need backup. I've been stripped of resources. I need, I need to call for some high IQ help, and I'm gonna have to be able to penetrate space. Won't come anytime soon, but we need it. Hey, if they are lensing, I think we might get we might be able to communicate a little bit. I think I'm not going to go into the alien thing, because obviously there are aliens. There's life on other worlds than Earth, but are they significant to our lives now? That's actually a good question. I don't know. I feel confident there's life on other celestial bodies, like, Europa. Although, what Arthur Clarke says about that spot. Yeah, we should be terraforming Venus. Venus would be a good planet, better than Mars. Closer gravity. You could seize a ton of solar energy. It already has CO2, so it has an atmosphere, and increase the amount of oxygen, but you could actually use the CO2 to generate the oxygen potentially, and then you could sling the CO2 over to Mars and build an atmosphere with that CO2. Oh, and it is magnetic. So, huge advantages. The atmosphere will stay much easier, water will stay, you won't have the radiation issues. I mean, it's just such a better planet. And I think that there is already water ice. I mean, Venus. Is there water ice? I can't remember. I know that gravity is more similar, and just the solar, and all that. I know that there's CO2 ice, because I think it's tidally locked or something. There's something weird with it. A lot of weird stuff with that. It's closer, Mercury ain't got a chance. We ain't gonna be able to do nothing with Mercury. It's too hot. But then you're like, if you can just block some of that sun, that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of energy. Lots of energy. We're at this point where energy should essentially be free, and the fact that instead of being free, we pay for it and tax the environment for it. I mean, what more evidence do you need that you're being lied to and exploited? Rather than ushering in an age where energy literally comes from the wind and from the sun and from the water, and does, if applied right, no damage to Earth's environment and ecosystem over the long term, especially compared to petros. And we need the petros to make plastics. But anyway, but instead of, and then nuclear. Nuclear is a great opportunity if it's done right. It should be impossible to melt down if you use a proper cooling system rather than water cooling, where water obviously boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So if you're cooling something that's going on in millions of degrees, and you're cooling with something that boils at 100 Celsius, obviously it's very easy for that to boil, and it boils so rapidly. If it's not constantly being applied through these pumps, it explodes. And that's what happened with Fukushima. So why would you put a water-cooled nuclear reactor on a fault line right at the ocean? That was stupid. Why would we use water-cooled at all? The only place you use water-cooled is in submarines. Use freaking salt-cooled, like molten salt, table salt style. So that happens in those, and these are the original designs, is that the uranium, becomes molten with the cooling salt, and it separates the distance between the uranium atoms or plutonium, slowing the fission or fusion reaction, and ultimately reducing the temperature. It destroys the fuel rod, but it doesn't result in a dangerous meltdown. It can't. And that has been proven. And I actually did a demonstration for Reagan. And so when you can take something that's going to radio decay anyway, uranium is going to radio decay anyway. All that they're doing is they're concentrating the uranium that, results in fission reactions when concentrated, so enormously high temperature reactions. So they're concentrating that, it's going to radio decay anyway. Ultimately to boil water, which there's got to be a better way, but regardless, you're talking about essentially a teaspoon or a tablespoon being thousands of barrels of oil worth of energy. So it's absurd to not seize on the opportunity that is nuclear energy. It's absurd not to seize on the opportunity that is wind energy, hydro energy, solar energy. Hydro has its problems if you're damming enormous rivers, blah, 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 like they did in China, but hydro needs to be done a lot more places. You can do damless hydro, and there are so many opportunities to do it in the United States. No dam, no possibility for any of these ecological or geological implications. Why wouldn't you do that? Solar, it's lasted hundreds of years, similar output. Why wouldn't you implement that on every roof that you possibly can? The only reason is because you want to be able to continue to be able to sell people energy, because that guarantees it guarantees status quo, and guarantees that the class hierarchy, the top of it stays the same. And what I have to ask is, who gave these people command over the resources in the ground? You can say that they bought them, but what gave them the right to buy them? And it's well, they had the money, and then how did they get the money? And this is a scamocracy. You need to wake up to it, and we need to en masse start to implement a much better society with or without government cooperation. I have a scheme for local area grid implementation that's actionable, and now I've actually been able to parallel it. Essentially, yeah, it's functional. I haven't been able to put it into multiple houses, but I've been able to simulate multiple 120 volt circuit systems. The only difference would be the distance, and you can obviously figure out the resistance and all that. It's not that hard. It's very easy. We should be incorporating steam engine, wind, water, solar, even geothermal in every neighborhood. You could create a local area grid that could be augmented by the primary grid. And this would make everything more stable, less vulnerable to power outages. The only thing that would be a disadvantage is the ultra-wealthy would make more money off you. And it's money it's like a tax. You have to pay it. You have no choice. It's a monopoly. You're cornered into paying these, utilities and energy companies, and, stop. Think about the agency the middle class would have if they were able to reduce their power and gas bill by 60%. And that's implementable. If everyone was to just contribute half of the cost of their energy bill for 1 year to investing in offsetting their energy bill for the rest of their lives. You could take off about 20 to 25% for an indefinite period if you were to just save that. I'm assuming that that's gonna be about $1,000, and right now with scrap solar, you're gonna have to do some work and learn some stuff. But yeah, you could really, you have to be smart with that. But yeah, you could do a lot with $1,000 in combination of solar and wind. You'd have to commit to those two, and you'd have to do a lot yourself. Obviously you have to get the scrap solar panels because it'd be the only way to make it a decent investment with that amount of money. And then you'd have to build a little wind turbine, like I was talking about, out of mostly just a scrap little electric motor and some fans and some welding and stuff. So yeah, it'd be tight, but you could definitely offset about 20% in this environment here in Michigan, which isn't the best for solar, but it's good for wind. But it's good for solar. Anywhere is good for solar, even Alaska, because there's no moving parts, and the loss of efficiency is fractions of a percent over each year. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of years of output, so. And you can get a 300-watt solar panel with cracked back acrylic for like $40. You have to have it shipped. They're big. That's a big 300-watt. That's a $300 panel. Now you're going to have to glue to seal the back, But then it's just good as new. I'd be totally pumped to implement and install any of these, because there's a minimum order for the shipping. It's a less than truckload situation. So just ship from Arizona to Michigan, and that's the best situation I've found. It's like $600 for as many as is up to a truckload or something. No, it's up to a quarter. I don't know. It's like you can ship up to like 50 of them or something like that for 600, 1 to 50. So obviously it makes more sense to get more. But if a small pool is made, gosh, that's just so affordable. Yeah, because then you're talking about all set, it's about $35 for a panel that would cost $300 otherwise, and all it has. And the only thing wrong with it is there's a crack in the back plastic, and it's not a critical piece. It just needs to be sealed so that water moisture doesn't get in there and corrode any of the contacts and everything, but mostly because it'll fog the front acrylic, the clear acrylic, where the light has to go through to get onto the solar cells, So the biggest thing is you just have to seal it so that it doesn't get foggy. It's a great opportunity. There are literally millions of these because they came out of, industrial solar things, mostly in Canada. And what happens is like a branch falls on them or something, or high wind cracks it back or whatever, they just scrap them. So there's like literally millions of these, and they're selling them dirt cheap. And I mean, most of them are putting out more than 90%. It's like 80. The guarantee, I think, it was 89% of the original or the stated output. So on a 300-watt panel, it's putting out, what is it? A guaranteed 270. Perfect. All right. Hey, like and subscribe and all that stuff. I'm doing pretty well. But I just hope, it continues to slope up to the point where I just want influence so that I can improve the world, like, and not from a arrogant or egotistical standpoint. If the world became more just, I would be able to make an income for myself, just literally helping people, fixing their electrical or writing real stuff or whatever. I don't know. I don't like the idea of trying to gain influence over people or authority of any kind, but I see that people in positions of authority are just so horrendously bad in terms of just quality of the execution of their authority, and then corrupted, and also a lot of them are fucked up narcissists, like, that have really messed up motivations, and I'm just seeing it over and over.